And we're now live, Mr. Chair.
Right, good morning, everyone, and very warm welcome to the members of the public, here, councillors, staff, as we start this additional council meeting for the 21st of July. Just a reminder, we are live streaming, so be kind and saying, as opposed to normal. Sure, you'll all be very good. So anyway, we'll get on to the item. So first of all, do we have any apologies? Go on to any declaration of interest. Confirmation of previous meeting minutes on page 6.
Although just a couple of very minor amendments, email through.
Very much. Councillor Hopkins and Councillor Holding. Any further comments on those? Councillor Kingham.
7.1 update irrigation company. There's the fifth paragraph doesn't quite make sense as it's written. That's one of the things I could, through eventually. Right. Well, I'll have my turn now, and that's one that I'm going to point out that it just needs some words changing from where it is to something like needed on done. Pretty basic. Will make sense.
Okay, we do have some public excluded minutes, which the meeting held on the 30th of June. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I will put those. So we've got those previous lots of minutes. So those in favour say aye. And those against, it's carried. So these other minutes were from the meeting on the 30th of June, excluded. And we can continue the year. There's not going to be any discussion on them. So
Actually,
approve them.
79, isn't it?
It will be 78. 78. There, just so just going public later. Two. Anyone got anything they want to particularly raise about those? Can't do them here. Councillor Newman, would you like to move? Yes, please. Okay, and Councillor Groby. Second of that. All in favour? Aye. And against? That's carried. Thank you for that. Just means we don't have to go to the meeting. Just moving on to my report on page 24. I'll take that as read. Probably just a couple of updates. We did have the rural and provincial meeting in Wellington last week. It was when the local government conference was supposed to be on. That got cancelled because of COVID. So my co-chair and I decided that we would see whether we could hold that last week, and we did. That happened. It was very timely because of all of the issues that we were dealing with, and we covered off in particular. We did quite a bit of detail on Three Waters, because with the government's announcement the previous week, there was a lot of questions really around the $761 million fund that's been brought in to help with Branch 1 funding. There's a lot more that we've got to learn. There's some workshops coming up, and councillors are all encouraged to go to the one that we're
just on that, I note that there's a young elected officials group that have been trying to organise a Zoom one as well, so that can't all see the presentations to get an idea. So we might be best to tap into that. Can't make it.
Yeah, it's there's a number of these meetings where they're not quite set up yet to live stream them, but LGNZ is working on trying to make more of those available. So yeah, it's an interesting situation. with that tranche one funding, where the steering group is at and where the government is at is not quite where GNZ wants us to be at as far as the details. For example, the tranche one funding says you've got to make an agreement on MOU by the 31st of August that you want to be part of that first stage, which you can then opt out of. But you know, it seems to be fairly easy to be part of money. The challenge is that may very well be up for somewhere like $5 or $10 million, and the challenge of actually trying to spend that time frame that they've stipulated is not going to be easy. And certainly our representatives are pushing for that time frame to be pushed out so we can start filling that straight away in many cases, but don't require us to spend it all in 1 year. It doesn't make for good decision making. It doesn't make for good planning for our contractors. Far better to spread that sort of spending over 2 or 3 years and save a boom and bust sort of scenario. So we'll see how that discussion goes. But generally, I've certainly sounded alarm bells about Three Waters in the past. I'm feeling more comfortable at the moment. Still got some room to move to where I don't like it to be, but it's at least using a bit more of the carrot rather than the stick approach to what we do.
And I guess we're going to discuss this further, but obviously these timeframes never line up with our planning processes, which are actually expected of us from national government level. So it makes it really challenging to do it like we need to be doing it, and consulting with our community, telling our community exactly what our big spends are, and then all of a sudden we're getting totally unrealistic timeframes to try and dump something on there, and what comes in, what goes out, and how do we manage that?
Yeah, it's certainly one of the challenges as well, that we've got long-term plans, we've got asset management plans. This comes in over the top of actions and changes what their priorities are without us actually talk to our community. Very true. Councillor Rose.
Yes, 3 questions, Chair. Thank you. First one, has there been any updates since you wrote your report from Mrs. Box? No. Second question, tourism Waitaki, have we had any notification that they may have received funding from the infrastructure fund and also the other fund for the Blue Penguin Colony? So that's the second question.
I haven't heard anything. No update on that. Yeah, I think they were expecting some word last week, and follow up on this to see.
Yeah, and the third question was, has there been any project movement on the shovel-ready projects yet that we urgently had to submit on some time ago? And you'll recall that I raised this at the last meeting. Yeah, I will continue to raise it this year until we get an answer, because I don't think it's good enough.
So we, just to recap, we put in 5, 2 were under 10 million. They were apparently referred off to the PGF. 3 that remained, 2 of them were significant water projects. With this new funding coming in for water, they've indicated that they won't be funding any of the 3 waters projects, apart from the new Plymouth one that seems to slip through. But they've taken, so that I don't expect that we will get approval for the 3 waters projects we had in there. So 2 of them. That leaves 1 project, which is the $12.5 million project for developments around the harbour. So we still haven't heard on about that one.
No, I think practically speaking, government is happy to let these announcements come out over a period of time. So there's no expectation that we'll get immediate notification, but we're waiting with bated breath.
Thank you.
I understand there are mayors and CEs around the country who are getting phone calls to say such a minister or prime minister won't be in your area on something. would you be happy to meet with them?
Wow. Oh no.
So anyway, we look forward to a phone call.
Yes.
Say yes to that invite.
Yes, and I probably will make it. Yeah, thank you.
Politics are at play. Councillor Hopkins.
Politics are at play. Forgive the cynicism. And look, can you just, I'm beginning to feel quite pessimistic coming back to water. When I saw your report on pages 28 and 29, I thought, wow, lots of money. We can spend it as we see fit, more or less. And all we have to do is just give them some data. Quite a lot of data, but data. And I was thinking, whoopee, at last, a good deal. But this morning, you basically, am I right in inferring that you've said, no, there are a lot more fish hooks in it than that? And it isn't quite as easy or straightforward or generous as that either.
There's still questions. I think that's one of the things that came through last week, and Councillor Newton was there and probably add to what I might have to say. There's some information that we don't have yet, some questions that were raised around, we know that, for example, if we pull out, do we have to pay anything back? And it's generally accepted that we probably don't have to, but we need to have that in writing. There's the ownership of the assets, where we've heard different things over time. Certainly it's been trending towards councils will retain ownership of the assets. These are assets that have been built up through ratepayer funding and go back to a number of decades ago. A number of our schemes were put in by farmers locally, and so there's very real ownership of those in our community. And so palming them off to a CCO or some type of structure where we don't own them directly is one of the concerns. Councillor Newton, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, the one thing that I took from the meetings up in Wellington was that the government hasn't, or the central government hasn't finalised its plans in that respect. So it's a wait and see. Certainly in the first tranche, it's cut and dried, but what the implications are of second and third tranche, to assure you.
See, just following on with a supplementary, if you like, listening to you this morning, we talked about having to give an answer by the 34th, requirement to give an answer by the 31st of August. I'm beginning to wonder whether this is actually a case of full rush in. I mean, maybe we should perhaps just be a little bit more careful or cautious about proceeding to come in, especially if, I mean, the idea of free money or good money or available money is attractive. But unless we have all of the I's dotted and T's crossed, maybe we should just be a little bit more cautious. What's the view of the two of you who were there?
Look, I think, yeah, we just need some answers to some of those questions, and the intention is to get those in that next period of time. We will, I'm sure, learn more at the workshops that are being held around the country, on the 29th of July in Timaru. Hopefully we'll answer some of those. But I think the steering group continues to meet, so it's a joint committee, local government, New Zealand, the Society of Local Government Managers, and Department of Internal Affairs. So they continue meeting, and I'm sure they're getting the feedback and seeking answers to the questions that everyone will be raising around the country.
Is Bill Bayfield influencing policy yet? Has he got his feet under the desk?
He presented at the Rural and Provincial as well. He told us all the things he doesn't have yet, which was a long list. I think he does have a desk, but he doesn't have a budget, and he hasn't got a chair and so forth. So anyway, there's so he's going in as to another RMA, the regulator for the for water. He will be good, but he's very much getting up to speed at the moment. He is the establishment CEO for that, so he'll be setting it up over a 2-year period, and then they'll get a more permanent structure in place. Whether that's him or someone else, I don't know. depending on whether he wants to carry on to that stage. But just ask Mr. Power.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that the Rural and Provincial Chief Executives met with officials prior to the Rural Provincial meeting. And it would be fair to say that the relationship between DIA officials and chief executives is very good. So in comparison to other reforms which have been undertaken, the relationship has strengthened as time has gone on. And the proposed memorandum, which government is asking local authorities to enter into now in relation to this issue, is very much couched in the terms of a no regrets, good faith relationship and undertaking. So the emphasis being on no regrets. So there's a genuine intent on the part of the Department of Internal Affairs and the Minister that when local authorities enter into this, should they choose to do so, that there literally be no regrets about it. In terms of timing, the expectation is that the memorandum will be done by the end of August, which leaves little time until the end of the financial year. The officials have indicated that as a minimum, a leeway of 3 months and possibly up to 6 months would be tolerable from their perspective. But obviously those things are also up for negotiation going forwards as well. So overall, the 761 million is the first tranche. It is literally a grant, so there's no expectation whatsoever that the funds be repaid. Under the memorandum of understanding, there is an expectation that the monies will be spent on infrastructure. It can be spent on both CapEx and on OpEx. And so, in essence, what it means is an opportunity for council to accelerate some of its work, which is in the long-term plan, not in this year's current budget, because that was already expected to be undertaken. But the intent is that this money strengthens our water assets and capabilities. So, I certainly personally feel confident that the relationship is sound and that there are no fish hooks in relation to the first tranche anyway.
Well, thank you. That's reassuring.
Just in response, Councillor Hopkins, to your thoughts about not jumping in early, I think we need to go back to what the intention was originally around the reforms, and certainly Local Government New Zealand supported the idea that reforms needed to happen, but it was the mandatory amalgamation side of things that was the real stopper. We were saying that amalgamation in some areas may be the best way to achieve the outcomes, but it's not necessarily the way you start solving the problem. And so what I think government is doing with this funding is saying, we're putting the ball back in your court. You've said that that may not be the best way and that you can meet the requirements we've got. So they're essentially saying, act early, tell us that you will spend this money to get up to the level that you need to be at. And then we won't have to be forced to do anything further and won't have to be forced to do forced amalgamations and things like that. So I'd say if we don't react as quickly as need be, we're going to find ourselves in a position where we then do have things done for us and to us.
So there are a number of areas that are held up by central government as well as things. So certainly Otago and Southland is one of those areas which were part of that. We're also on the periphery of the Canterbury, potentially all of the top half of the South Island, and we're also having discussions with our South Canterbury neighbours. So we are looking at all the options, and right along it's been a case of telling central government, you let us know what needs to happen as far as your policy is concerned. Let us decide how we're going to do it. And I still have our staff coming up with great lateral solutions that are cost effective. They are effective. They actually work. And you're not necessarily going to get one water entity for the whole South Island. So we keep working on that. There was still lots of discussions going on following the local government, central government forum that's been a series of other follow-up meetings. One of those is the sector, I think, and central government talking about 3 waters. On Friday, the rural provincial secretary himself and me, Alex Walker, a Zoom meeting with the Prime Minister and 5 ministers on more the social side of things, the localism, the ability to deliver on the ground, and talk to the cabinet about how we can help them deliver outcomes which they can't do with their different entities. So there's these ongoing discussions, and the good thing is that the oil tanker container ship is 2 minutes towards where we want it to go, which is quite positive. Okay, just moving on from that, I think everything else is pretty good there. I do just want to make mention again of Michael Sandry and his team with the observation of just such a magnificent achievement of getting, having such a fantastic race, bringing athletes and their families to the district, and raising a whole lot of funds for charitable purposes. So I finished off with that one on my report. It's such a great positive thing for our community. Understandably, 3 years of working hard and on a break now. Absolute hats off to them. Councillor Wallstein.
Yeah, thank you for raising that, Mayor Kircher. I was going to raise it as well, because I think it's been a marvellous effort by a small group of 3 people who put a lot of their time into it, and probably to the detriment of their, certainly Michael Sandry's case, the detriment of his own business maybe as well. So a great effort, and he deserves all the praise that you've given them. So just a second comment regarding your article on Lower 10th Street and Itchen Street, and your comment that sometimes processes can get a bit ahead of themselves. That's exactly right. I think we as councillors were very surprised to see that appear in the front page of the Mail and get them discussed at council. So yes, the processes can get a bit ahead of themselves at times, and one thing that has done is certainly has provoked some reaction in the Honourable Mail letters to the editor already. So I'm sure councillors will discuss that proposal in the near future.
Yeah, it's we want to, if we're going to have change, we want to make sure that it's right, and I think staff have acted in good interests, but it's just making sure that we've included in that. And I do congratulate them on getting the funding to actually do the trial, just to make sure we are on board with what's going to happen. And I had a quick catch up yesterday afternoon with the most affected cafe owner, and said that one of the criteria for me, and I think for councillors, is making sure that we've got good parking still, that we don't lose parking, or any parking ideally. So I think it's very much the case of let's get on with the discussion, and let's have a look at what a detailed plan might look like, and make sure that we are comfortable with it before we get too far ahead. Any other comments on my report? Thank you. We'll put that. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. So now moving on to page 32 and the CCO Tourism Waitaki's final statement of intent. Mr. Hope.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Kircher. So all the CCOs are required to have a statement of intent that has been received by council. Received 3 of them at the 30 June council meeting, and extended the deadline for Tourism Waitaki by 1 month. So we're now receiving that version of the statement of intent. It needs to be noted, a statement of intent can be varied at any time, and I think that would be the expectation of what will happen with Tourism Waitaki over the coming 12 months. The timing of this is just a lot inconvenient with the amount of uncertainty in relation to funding the sector and the services that they will be required to deliver. So I'm really just proposing that this be received, and then we, without too much debate, and we continue the discussions with Tourism Waitaki about their sort of immediate and medium-term future and the environment, and really wait for the decisions from the Crown in relation to funding, because that will have a significant impact on what they will try and achieve over the next 12 months.
Councillor Walston.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Hope. Just a couple of points of clarification. The title of the report 6.1 is the final statement of intent. It's called final. I mean, it's not the draft, it's the final. It's not the final whatever. As soon as what final is there.
Yep.
Then going to the actual draft of the page 35, it's still stated a draft statement of intent on page 35. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really a timing issue. I think their view was that it needed to be received by council before it could become final. So,
okay. So this is it. This is the final.
Yes.
That's my Thank you.
Well, look, sorry. My view is not. I don't want to accept this in its current form. I think vision is appalling relative to the simplicity and clarity of the one that the Mayor's mentioned that we were talking about the other day. Waitaki, the best place to be. I mean, this is an entity that could have a vision like that. Waitaki, the best place to visit. Something short, succinct, really, if you like, inspirational. What they've got there is convoluted and qualified and bureaucratic. I also question the objective. In my view, all the words before boosting the reputation or increasing the reputation of the Waitaki District to a point where it will be sought should disappear. Their persistence in continuing to recognise, as they say, the aspiring Waitaki Whitestone Geopark on that page and on page 39, promote and market the Waitaki Whitestone aspiring global geopark. Sorry, it's time to say, to ask a really important question: Has that got a future as a concept in the form that it existed pre-COVID, or is it time to kind of try and unpack it and focus on particular elements of it or something of that sort? We haven't seen the business plan on that, but and they're not here to answer these questions. But in my view, these are really critical things that we should be talking about with them right now. In a world where, you know, as I saw on television the other night, in May this year, 16,000 people went both ways across the New Zealand border. In May 2019, 1 million people went across our border. That's the difference, and that's the impact on entities like Tourism Waitaki. And it doesn't seem to me that this statement of intent reflects the magnitude of the change they're confronting. You know, I just think we need to me, it's a draft statement of intent still, and it's one that I think we as shareholders are entitled to work on with them further.
The vision is the board's. You know, we appoint directors, and it's got to be their vision.
Okay, that's fine.
You know, you can say we can have a discussion. Well, we did have a discussion 2 weeks ago with them. A workshop with them, and no, we didn't talk about this here. We talked about all of those other things that you talked about. What is tourism looking like? We've all accepted that we actually don't know exactly where things are going, and this is the statement of intent pointed out that it is going to have to be a fluid document. So the reason Mr. Ho pointed out that it can be changed at any time, because it will need to be changed, because things are developing. I mean, it wasn't that long ago there was good expectations we'd be opening our borders to Australia any time now. I don't think that's going to happen. You know, are we going to be opening our borders to any of the Pacific Islands? We don't know. So there are so many variables in the situation at the moment. You know, Tourism Waitaki directors, we know, have been working very hard to try and get things sorted. We may not agree on what they've done, but that we appoint them to get on with it and look at it and solve them. when it comes time to reappoint, etc. It is their vision, it's got to be that, but we will be having ongoing discussions with them, because we all need to understand where this situation's at. So that's what I'll tell you there. We've got a number of people to speak to.
Just a bit of a reminder, like, take on board totally what you're saying, and I think these discussions need to be ongoing. The statement of intent is currently reflective of our contract with them, and then it's downscaled to respond to the COVID situation. And moving forward now, the debate isn't around the statement of intent. The debate's going to have to happen around the contract that we have with Tourism Waitaki and what our expectations are there. At the moment, you know, I get your points on Geopark and things. That's a discussion outside of this. And at the moment, we've still got that listed through in our contract. And if that's going to change, there's a discussion to happen in a contract state, which obviously is going to take a bit more planning because it's a bit of a moving feast as well. But this is not our document. This is how they're going to go about doing what our expectations as shareholders are. So we've just got to be very careful when we have those discussions and when they're actually helpful to be had, because this is a board that's moving really fast and has had to go down to next to nothing. And it's also directors that are basically themselves chosen to take a total pay cut and aren't getting anything and are putting huge money in. So I actually think I put a huge amounts of time in. So I think we just need to be really mindful that they are responding to something that we've never seen before, and they're keeping us informed. And I think we need to set up, we need to keep asking questions, but we've got to be really careful not to pull the mat out from underneath them in public forums at all stages, because you don't agree with Geopark. That's a discussion that's got to be had around the council table. And I think we need to decide that. But I think when you keep throwing it to them in a document when they are responding to the direction that we've set is really unfair.
Yeah, look, this is, in my view, a business as usual type of document. I don't think it should be. The tourism sector in the country is in a very difficult state, and this organisation is part of that difficult state. Therefore, it's difficult for us as well. I appreciate that. I don't like this statement of intent, but I will support it based on what Paul has said before about having discussions. One of the phrases that are used on page 37, last paragraph, Council's primary objective for continued ownership and control of tourism Waitaki is to advance tourism in the district by fostering a positive, diverse and sustainable tourism sector. That's saying that is our primary objective for continued ownership. So I would like to see in the future that bashed out a bit more around the table to make sure that's still relevant. And the other thing is, I think it's very disappointing of the 5 photographs that are in this document. There is not one photograph of our 5 beautiful lakes that we have in our district. And that is disappointing to me. There are 3 of Wanneroo, which is fine. One of which got a very good looking gentleman in a cap here with a thing in front of him, which looks very good. But seriously, it's disappointing. We had boulders and there was a seaside photograph, and we don't have anything of our beauty. So I just want to make that point, and then that summarises my view that do they really give a toss about the Ahari? Do they really care about Narama, Urta Matata, Kurau, Ohau, and all this, but when the focus is kind of like this? So that's what I'll say. But it does look to me to be a business as usual document, and I'm struggling to basically support it, even though I will.
Yeah, well, I think certainly the amount of effort and time and money put into upstation would be a very strong indicator that we very much care about
No, just no.
This is, whilst it's a public document, I don't think this is the advertising brochure that they're going to use. Councillor Hunter-Daly.
I'm afraid I would have to share the same views as Councillor Roby as well, just in terms of the statement of intent. I understand that we have to accept it, but I think it's still important to share our views or pass them on to the board. I'm just alluding to page 39 of the document. in terms of our shareholder expectations, how they're going to be actively monitored. It says here that we'd receive a half yearly report and an annual one, and I think given the circumstances, it might be helpful to increase that reporting back, just in terms of financial and non-financial performance reporting. I think it's important that we keep in touch with them on a regular basis, just to assess and evaluate that.
So normally we'd be meeting with them every 3 months. It's likely that those meetings will be slightly more frequent. So either as council or as executive. Any other comments?
Well, so if I just respond very briefly, I take Councillor Timmendale's points, but what concerns me is if you look at page 38, their objective, number one, okay, first of all, they say that they enable operators and communities to deliver experiences. Objective, in recognising the aspiring Waitaki Whitestone Global Geopark, they've put that front and centre, it's number one. And I think what I'm hearing from Ross and others, certainly my feeling is, I think whether we want it or not, it's got nothing to do with whether we're in favour of it. My view is COVID-19 has totally transformed what tourism is and will be for the foreseeable future. And to the extent that the Geopark was an outward-looking engagement with international visitors, in my view, it needs a complete rethink. Well, that's all I'm saying, and that's why I said
to debate that particular.
No, I know, but I'm just explaining.
I will say it always had 3 components. One was the international visitors, one was domestic visitors, and one was actually the local population understanding their own story. Those 3 strong components, 2 of them are still very relevant. We will have this discussion in the future, but when every district is looking to attract domestic visitors to their districts, the people are looking for lots of different reasons to come to a place, and the Geopark and how it umbrellas and the marketing sense, all of the wonderful things that we have in the Waitaki district is one of the things that we can utilize. Whether it's the right thing or not is something we can discuss, but it is a brand and it can be used, and it needs to be, if we're going to use it, it needs to be explained and promoted in that sense. But we won't be having that discussion right at the moment. We do have the document in front of us. Councillor Wolfie.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Purchase. I'll support Councillor McGarvey. I think it's a business as usual statement of intent. And I think we have to accept that over the last few months, Tourism Waitaki's focus and attention has been on other matters, if you like, which have been thrust upon them at a very unexpected stage, and the statement of intent probably has not been their major priority. So it's been pretty much carried forward, if you like, as business as usual, and we have to accept it in that frame. And as Mr. Hope said, it can be amended at any time in the future, but at the present time, this is what we have. And like Mr. Councillor McGravy, I'm not totally happy, but I'll support it.
So I'd like to move the recommendation. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I think I just flagged that. I'm not going to vote against it, but we've got to talk to them about it, in my view.
And we will. Right, we'll put it, those in favour, say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Moving on to Local Government Funding Agency membership, page 47. Starring the elegant Mr. Hope again.
Thank you, Mayor Kircher. So this is the 3rd time Council has considered this matter, and there will be another couple of times when you consider more of the nuts and bolts and the actual, well, if a favourable decision is made, the actual amounts and the devices and mechanisms you want to use of the options available through the LGFA. So we have received feedback. I think the proposal was well publicised. That feedback received was all positive and supportive. there were very limited questions in the community. I think people could see the essentially the sense of it that if council does need to borrow, and we do, that doing it at the lowest possible cost is really the only sensible option, and that is what the LGFA offers. Taking the opportunity to make some light adjustments to the liability management and investment policy that will be further reviewed through the long-term plan process. So it's not really a final, it's sort of got a 12-month life at the most. And really, I think it's been well discussed, and happy to answer any questions about it.
Do we have any questions? Councillor Wallstein?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Hope, for your explanation. Just going to your top of page 49 4, the options there. Option 1, not pursue LGFA membership. Option 2, confirm the desire to join as a non-guaranteeing. And 3, seek to join your LGFA as a guaranteeing member. Then you canvas that further down in your paragraph below. I probably came to the opinion that perhaps we should be a guaranteeing member rather than a non-guaranteeing member, because to be a guaranteeing member, that means that we would take our share of any losses of a local authority New Zealand wide. The chance of that to me would be extremely remote. The risk of that risk is very, very almost nil. But on the other hand, council would receive a saving of interest of 0.1%. 0.1% is not a lot, but to use your phrase, at the lowest possible cost. The lowest possible cost would be a guaranteeing member. So I'd be suggesting to council that we should consider the recommendation, and the council should join as a guaranteeing member instead of a non-guaranteeing member. Thank you, McCutcheon. Any feedback?
Yeah, it was really so we are using Bancorp to advise us through this process, and they have one of the papers they've advised about 30 councils on the process, so we just took their advice. This was signalled as a possible alternative, so I have sought their advice on it, and they said it's a relatively simple process to change the guaranteeing member at this stage. Council wishes to. There is some slight additional cost that they estimated in between $3,000 to $5,000, just changing the documents and going through a couple of extra processes. There might be a couple of further amendments to the investment policy, the liability management policy. But again, that we don't need to consult on those, so they would be minor, so it could be done as part of the process if council wanted to pursue that. So it's really just some refinement and a little bit of extra work, but it is achievable based on the process that we've done today.
If I can just respond to that. Thank you, Mr. Hope. And I guess based on what you said, my feeling is that should council ever decide to do it in the past, that extra cost would need to be incurred then. Yep. It might be greater as a separate exercise. Yes. So I think my feeling again is that we should do it once and do it completely. And might be supportive of changing the recommendation to a guaranteeing member. I'm keen to hear my colleagues' thoughts on that as well.
Okay, we'll get into discussing that shortly. But Councillor Hopkins, you had a question?
Yeah, I did. Just assuming that 3 changes from non-guaranteeing to guaranteeing, 2 questions arose for me in number 4. There's a reference to other materials to put LGFA membership in place and allow borrowing to take place, and for this to be presented to the 25 August 2020 council meeting. Now, question 1, are we anticipating a proposal to borrow coming to us on that day, or is that just a general reference to being able to borrow? And question 2, if we sort of set the switch today from non-guaranteeing to guaranteeing and got some pushback from the community that said, hey, we're not happy with this, could we on the 25th of August review that and revert to the original? And can things be amended on the 25th of August, or will that be a locking in place a done deal?
If council made the decision on the 25th to revert back to a non-guaranteeing member, then that would halt everything else and would need to go back to the LGFA, because essentially the intent was to have everything in place to allow council to borrow on the 25th.
Right. So effectively, we're deciding today whether we will be a guaranteeing or non-guaranteeing member. And then, could I just make a very quick comment through you, Mr. Chair? The one thing I would flag to you and to officers, and perhaps to Mr. Power, this was a consultation process. We did get 3 submissions. They are public documents, and in my view should have been in the agenda. Because one of the submissions argues for guaranteeing membership status rather than non-guaranteeing. And I think, in the same way that any plan and other submissions are publicly available, those 3 submissions should have been available for us for the public today. But I mean, it's also important to reference the fact that one submitter did say, don't be non-guaranteed, be guaranteed. And that was the only submitter who put their name to the submission.
Have the submissions been made public, available publicly?
No.
Yes. Right. First of all,
Paul, 2.7 interest rate risk management hedging on that. If we did borrow XYZ for 20 years or whatever, the review of the annual review of interest, or how does that work? And also something I can't quite understand, maybe I was too, but on 2.9, when the repayment provisions for any specific loan have been fully funded, no further contributions will be required for that loan. What does that mean?
Sorry, I'd need to.
Page 55. Third paragraph on 2.9.
Yeah, all it's saying is that once a loan's been fully repaid, that's it.
Well, that's pretty normal, isn't it?
Yep.
So regarding interest rate reviews, is that on an annual basis, or are they expected to increase? Would say probably, well, they won't go down. But if that is, you talk about hedging, so how do you?
No, I mean, this is what will be presented on the 25th, assuming this goes through, is I expect a representative from Bancorp to actually come and talk about the variety of products that LGFA offers to member councils. There's a wide variety of things you can do, both in terms and interest rate structure. So it's really finding the one that matches council's requirements. So it could be, I believe they go out to 10 years, and it would be 10-year fixed term. Fixed amount. So you're committed to the 10 years, and then you might use an interest rate hedge or something else to potentially limit that.
If you had a floating rate.
So yeah, it wasn't for today, but there's certainly a product that will be a good match to what council's risk appetite and debt profile.
Okay. Councillor Roby,
just to, I support what Colin said before, but just on the 20 million max, if it was non-guaranteed, what could we go up to if we are a guaranteed member? Is there a limit before we have to get a, what's the expression? Is a approval required to get a rating? Sorry, what's that?
Good.
So, yeah, we do not have a credit rating at the moment. We need it. But yeah, once you go past, I think the amount's about $35 million, it becomes worthwhile to get a credit rating because of saving on the interest rate. But you know, all of our projections in terms of what our debt requirements would be is that we, at the moment, we wouldn't get anywhere near that. So that was why we were, what sort of the key characteristic that we're looking at to determine whether we're guaranteeing or non-guaranteeing.
With the public in the room, yeah.
Yes, three shots, I think.
Sorry?
With the public in the room, yeah, the years is 35 million. What are our projections?
Well, our estimate is that 20 was a maximum. We thought, well, it really depends what happens in terms of crowdfunding and everything else. Would have thought it would have been about 15 million is the maximum.
That's still bearing in mind we've still got money invested.
Yes.
So we're still a net investor, even $30 million of debt. We've still got more money out, loaned out, earning a higher interest rate. Right, Councillor Milham.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Hope. My question purely was around what projections, you know, I mean, $20 million is a significant amount of limit for borrow, and the projections are that we are going to be remaining below that. What period of time does that projection, in your mind, last for?
At the moment, we'd estimate about 5 years.
Yeah.
Because that's when we've sort of had combined significant inflows from both North Otago irrigation and from the retirement village. So that investment would be repaid, and unless council finds another more attractive investment opportunity, that would be used to pay down that external debt.
And just another quick question: if we were to look towards finding that 35 million level and acquiring a credit rating, how much would it cost for us to go through the credit rating process?
It's about, I think the initial assessment is around $50,000, and it's about $30,000 each year after that to maintain it.
Councillor Percival, and then Councillor King.
Yeah, you sort of answered part of my question with Kelly's questions, because I was just concerned, interested in the fact that we did get to a point where we could repay an external loan from the budgetary without existing loans without own money. Would there be a penalty?
Well,
I can't see one.
No, I mean, essentially that's what we'd work on with Bancorp, is to get a far better projection of the borrowing requirements, the likely inflows, and then actually, so it won't be one loan, it will be a series of loans to match essentially our borrowing requirements at the lowest possible net cost.
So early repayment would like.
Because we'd probably go for a piece that'll be 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years.
Yeah, look, this is, it's a signal to the community also that we're not aiming to borrow wholesale huge amounts. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to get money at considerably less than what we would be if we needed to go and overdraft with banks. So it's sort of an opportunity. I can't, you know, we're not putting a message out that there is an intention to borrow lots and lots of money, because I don't think that is the intention.
Councillor Newton.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that as a council, we haven't had to borrow, and I'd go against the requirement to go as guaranteeing borrower, mainly because we don't know how much we're going to be spending over the next 5, 10, 15 years. As such, we do have investments which will be on eventually. They are financially sound. Do we need to actually go down that track of, you know, it might save 0.1%, but in the scheme of things, that's that $20,000, or you know, what's the other costs associated with maintenance of it. So I'd personally go down the non-guarantee. We don't need to spend everything that we get, and need to just look forward.
Councillor Wolseley.
Yeah, thank you, Nico. Just to follow up from Councillor Kingham's comments, I think he made a very valid point that the money being borrowed is being borrowed for services in Waitaki District. And I haven't got them in front of me, but the large capital items that have been spent in the last few years on extension of water schemes, upgrading of other infrastructure, is what the money is being spent on. So it's not being borrowed to invest in the share market or anything ridiculous and silly like that. It's been bought for a be borrowed and used for business as usual running of council and also to carry out projects for the benefit of the Waitaki District Council community.
Councillor Tavendale.
Are we just waiting or asking questions?
Yeah,
Just
no,
I'm going to get told off.
Because there's discussion on whether we're going to become a guaranteed member or not. So I think it's helpful to have a bit more discussion so that we can shape up what the eventual motion is going to be.
Cool, that's right. I won't get in trouble then. I just support actually Councillor Wallstein's take on things for a number of things. It was pointed out that we don't have to spend it all on the 20 million. We don't have to spend it all on any amount, but if we can get a more favourable rate, I think that's good for our ratepayers. I think as to projections, we've got projections for the next few years, but again, any direction and any actual major spend is decided by councillors. And I would like to think that we're going to be basing that on, hey, we've got money, let's use it. It's going to be a case-by-case basis as to what's the best decision to make for our community. But in the meantime, to have a better rate, and actually what we are doing, getting a better deal on, is a good thing. And as mentioned, we are a net lender at this stage, and the good thing is that we can actually currently gain funding to do things in our community for a lot cheaper than our community can arrange to do that. And that could actually be a really point of being able to actually support our community in the way we do things. And we can't see the future, but if we've got a better rate and options up our sleeves, let's do it once and do it right.
Councillor.
Yeah, Paul, we've had 3 figures put in front of us today. This $3,000 to $5,000 cost change. And then your estimate that we'd never be likely to borrow more than 15 million. And I suppose the argument of guaranteeing or non-guaranteeing membership literally comes down to what we say. So what would be the interest, your estimated interest? Let's assume you borrowed 15 million. What would that 0.1% interest saving roughly come to over there? Because I don't know the likely figure. I mean, are you able? It seems to me that's the nub of the matter.
It would be significantly greater than $5,000.
Right. No, that's fine. So in other words, it would be a financial benefit to us. Yeah. To do it once, do it right, do it now. Okay. No, thank you. Thank you very much.
Are we getting close to a motion?
Yeah. One final question from me. What's our current debt at the moment? I believe it might be in the vicinity of 7 to 8 million.
That's correct.
Okay, so this loan of, let's just pick the number of 15, will be used to partially pay that back at a much higher interest rate than we'll be borrowing this money.
We'd immediately repay it.
Right, yes, okay, and the saving in interest will be quite substantial.
Yes, but we essentially did set the budgets anticipating his low interest rate.
Okay, all right, no, that's fine.
Saving, which is help with the zero average rate. Right. Someone want to move? Councillor Wallstein.
Yeah, thank you, Miguel. I'm happy to move all 4 resolutions with the changing 3 to firms that it wishes to join the LGFA as a guaranteeing member.
Second. Councillor Tavendale.
Could we? If you want to become a guarantee member, can we just change, rather than have the 25th of August, to make it the earliest possible council meeting?
Yes,
I'm not sure of how much time, how much extra time, and that's quite tight with 4 weeks. That's all right.
Secondary. Change number 4 as well. So any further discussion?
Just very quickly, having heard Councillor Newton's arguments and having heard fiscal information from Mr. Hope, I think on balance I'm persuaded to support the resolution as it stands. Despite, and I accept the reservations and concerns.
Yeah, I'm tending to persuade, obviously. The one question I suppose I relation to that would be what substantive changes would there be to this document off the top of your head legally that we should know about? Go and guarantee.
My understanding is that essentially there are no substantive changes. It's just going through and making sure the wording is appropriate, and it may require insertion of 1 or 2 extra sentences into the policy. Everything else is fine. I think in terms of consultation, it was a foreseeable outcome. We're talking about being a non-guaranteeing member, then another option was to become a guaranteeing member, and that's fine.
Just speaking in favour of the motion itself, I think it made sense to join the LGFA. Marginal whether it's as a non-guaranteeing member or guaranteeing member, there's a good discussion around that, and a good reason to put forward for becoming a guaranteeing member. And certainly support that. Hopefully the extra work needed isn't too onerous, and basically can be put in place relatively quickly and take advantage of the cheaper rates. I think it's the prudent thing to do on behalf of ratepayers, and just that reassurance that we've got more than enough funds loaned out, earning a higher interest rate, and they're not going to be borrowing at a lower interest rate. So it's pretty much a win-win as far as what I can see, and certainly support the motion. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll put the motion in. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much for the I know it's really not going well.
So just before Paul goes, we've got the new amended liability management and investment policy in front of us. Can I just ask a couple of questions about content and meaning? They're not typos and things. They are. Sure. Would you allow that, please, in the future?
Yeah.
Look, just very quickly, on page 64, we've got this reference to the disaster fund set at 10 million, and making case-by-case decisions as where the funds drawn down are required to be replenished at the earliest possible opportunity. It says we are maintaining a disaster fund. Is all that still entirely relevant? Hasn't practice, if not policy, changed some of our positions regarding the disaster fund? No, it's not 10 million.
No, there is because it doesn't all need to be a cash fund. So part of that fund is essentially a line of credit that we've established.
Right. Fine. So what about replenishment at earliest opportunity? I mean, given that we've used this fund for the support and stimulus package.
Yep. Well, essentially that's a decision that you'll need to make as part of the long-term plan. What is the and you can review this, I think, as part of the long-term plan and decide whether the amount is still appropriate.
So what you're saying is, as of now, 4.4 more or less still fits. Okay.
Yep.
Look, very quickly, in 66, with property investments, again, just are we actually making these quarterly comparisons of rental yields and property sales to budgeted ones? I mean, I can't remember the last time I saw a council annual report with budgeted property sales. Page 66, 8.3.
Sorry. When you are provided a quarterly financial report that does include the results of property values, it could be more transparent if you desire it.
Okay, so maybe that's what we're working on for the committee. And just finally, Miyukichi, thank you very much for allowing this. Page 68, 1.3, the short-term money market lines. Can you just, this is more sort of me seeking explanation. Paragraph 2, I should say, the minimum amount for a cash loan is 1 million. Is that when we're a borrower or a lender? Will that apply with the LGF? I mean, what does all of that mean? Sorry. terms of our policy?
That's an area once we get the FA well established that is probably likely to change quite significantly because we won't be using essentially the BNZ type facility.
Right, so that might be something that when the documentation comes back at the earliest possible meeting, we may see an amendment to that.
No, I think it'd be more over the review as part of the long-term plan.
No. So that's something that needs to be tweaked. Okay. Thanks, Peter. Thank you, Richard.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Hope. Right, now moving on to 2.1, and use covering in four pages on page 71. Okay, so councillors, take
Quinn is to introduce report. Speak to you. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very briefly, Support and Stimulus Fund is open. We received one official application for both the Community Resilience Fund and the Economic Resilience Fund, and 5 are in this sort of discussion stage of let's have a discussion before they make an application. These have ranged in location across 3 wards within the district, and at the moment we are the scale ranges from several $1,000s to several $100,000. They're being assessed by a team of officers before that assessment is provided to the relevant committee of council to make a decision. In terms of credit card spend, it shows our groceries and liquor are our biggest spend in the district, followed by fuel. The store types, most of them are actually trending back towards their 2019 performance for the same week of the year. A note to our comms team, they've achieved some very early wins in district promotion. That's to support the visitor related businesses across the district. They've done some great work. Our job seeker numbers have plateaued. We have there is a national, not sure what the word is, benefit, but allowance called the COVID Income Relief package, and at the moment we've got 31 of those in the Waitaki district. So we'll just have to see what happens in terms of all our figures post school holidays, post the domestic visitor travel boost we've had post lockdown. Happy to take questions.
Okay, councillors, any questions? Hopkins?
Oh, yeah, look, I have 3. On page 71, those card transaction figures at the bottom of the page, are they local ones?
That's all.
3 million and so on. Is that
all the figures for card spend are Waitaki district?
okay? But the graphs have got national ones, is that right? The charts
on page 72. No, all Waitaki district.
Oh, they are. Okay. So question number 2 on page 74, noting that even now we're back to levels that we had income spending over 8 years, 9 years ago, but would that relatively small amount of accommodation service spending shown at the bottom of the page, would that sort of say to us that most of these people who are coming here are day trippers? Is that what sort of trends are we noticing with visitors from outside the district from that point of view?
I'd have to refer more to Tourism Waitaki for that data, but from what we've got here, which is based largely on card spend again on a national sense, because they can tell where cards are domiciled, it does show that obviously they're spending in shops, but accommodation is smaller, so it could well be. I mean, we've had a visit friends and family campaign, so that may well have produced staying with friends and family.
And my last question, and I'm not saying we shouldn't have done it, but the video that shot of Ben Hurley, who's a genuinely funny man, what was the cost, and does that come from the ED budget?
It has come from a budget of communications, and we've recorded anything that we've related to district promotion or as a result of COVID with a separate code so they can be reported on specifically.
So we've got a comms budget. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Well, you pay more attention than that. But you are right, Ben Hurley is a genuinely funny one, unlike some other comedians that we've school he's been to, but he wasn't funny.
Mr. King.
Councillor Millward.
Just out of interest, I'm just wondering when that video is, doesn't have a date.
Actually, Lisa's just gone to someone, so it will be used across a range of platforms, and we've got a license to use it for, I think, 3 months. So we'll be sort of not saturating, but pushing it out through a lot of channels. So it will be via main social media channels. I think that's possibly a different one we're talking about there, but you're talking about the Ben Hurley video.
Yeah, the Ben Hurley.
Yeah. So, that's over the next 3 months. We'll be pushing it out through social channels.
Starting soon. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Given my comment earlier about the Waitaki Valley, I noticed the only video is the Elephant Rocks in New Zealand. This video is done in the middle of winter. So given that some of the district thrives in the summertime, another video to be produced to reflect a probably slightly different type of environment in the summertime, Mr. Conn.
Well, subject to the communications budget with Councillor McCroby, there could well be another video produced. Also, it is really dependent on seeing how Tourism Waitaki goes with district promotion money. We're filling the gap here until that's decided with what money and income they'll get. So we're just filling the gap and keeping us at the front of mind of the country.
So I'd like to move to receive the reports. Councillor Newton, thank you, and Councillor McCroby. Any further discussion? Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against, that is carried. Thank you. And I think that pretty much. Okay, so thank you very much for your participation in the meeting today, and we've still got a few more workshops on the district plan and other matters. So thank you very much, and we'll now declare the meeting closed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.